All right, hello again, friends, and welcome back to the Soul Unleashed podcast. Today, I'm going to interview Jamie Gerardi, and just be perfectly clear up front, Jamie is my nephew. I've known him since he was born, since before he was born, probably.
True.
But the cool thing about that is that I know the kind of person he is and who he is, and so I'm really looking forward to listening to his story. As I've been on my journey, I've learned a lot about spirituality, but I've also learned that there's many ways to get to spirit. And sometimes that's through meditation, sometimes that's through reading, sometimes that's through some type of personal experience. We're going to talk about today is Jamie's experience with ayahuasca, which is another way to get there. And I've read some books by Father Sean O'Leary, Mike Dooley, other people who have talked about using ayahuasca to attain this spiritual plane, if you will. And I'm just going to ask Jamie about why he did it and to fill us in on what it was like. So, Jamie, welcome.
Thank you so much. So nice to be back.
Good. Yes,
Appreciate
right.
it.
This is the second time. I appreciate that. So Jamie, just fill us in first of all on why you did this.
It's a good question because for a long time, I had many clients who had done it, who had taken it, and who had had a lot of positive experiences from it, but it just did not resonate with me. But there came a time where it kept coming into my consciousness, like I kept seeing signs for it. It kept coming up in different discussions, and usually when things just keep coming up, I need to take a deeper look. And so I did, and it did start to resonate. And then I started to connect with kind of the frequency of Aya, like the consciousness, and which came coming through in meditations and whatnot. And the message was, you don't have to do it. It's not necessary, but it would be helpful if you did. It would expedite things. And I said, okay, well, I'll give it a try. I generally don't feel like I would need medicine or any type of outside assistance with connecting to source, but this was a different kind of connection that I had not experienced before. So I just followed the intuition, I followed the signs, and I just went for it. That's really
Let's
what
talk about that just real quick for a second. You said you connected with Aya.
happened.
Is that you made it sound almost like it was its own consciousness? What does that mean? You connected with it?
Yeah, so kind of the theory or the idea behind these plant medicines, and there's many different ones, not all of them with the same effects, but they the shamans who deal with them, they consider them each to have their own kind of collective consciousness. So, for example, like all the oak trees might have a collective consciousness, but all of the aya, the leaves that are used in ayahuasca, they have a consciousness, and it's like talking to a person. It's very interesting. So it's new for me, but
Okay.
it was interesting.
So tell us what you had to do to prepare for this. Like we're not going to talk about where you did it or anything, but like you just don't walk in and sit down and do this, right? How did you have to prepare for it?
That's a really good question. So they recommend that at least 2 weeks before you do it, that you change your diet. So if you can, plant-based, no soy, no tomatoes, no garlic, no onions, nothing spicy. So very bland foods usually, and you have to kind of reduce things that would kind of excite your nervous system. So like no intimacy, for example. Don't do anything kind of wild and crazy during those 2 weeks. Just stay chill. No alcohol, no drugs. And in fact, if you can, they would want you to get off of your medication. So you might have to work with your doctor on that, but the idea is a lot of the medications can interfere with what the medicine kind of gives you. And the idea with the food is a lot of the food that we eat increases our serotonin levels. So like tryptophan, for example, from turkey and things like that, a lot of them have similar, I'm not an expert in this, but like chemical compounds that would reduce the effects of the DMT when you take it.
Okay.
And it could
So
give
you
you a
went through
bad
that.
trip, so
Okay.
to speak. if you
So you went through that preparation.
Yes.
Uh, did you feel good, or when the time came for you to go do it, did you feel good or bad, or how did it affect you?
It wasn't too much different. I mean, I did have to cut out tomatoes, garlic, and onions, which I use a lot, but it was fine. And I did feel good. I felt really chill. I actually, you had to also stop caffeine. And I had stopped caffeine a month or more before that event. And I feel really good now. Like it was hard to get off of caffeine. It was not
Okay,
easy, but I'm still not having caffeine now. And I feel really good.
okay, all right. So take us through what happened when you got there.
So the one that I did was, it was three ceremonies. Usually it's one or two, but this one's three. And we go there, there it's very traditional, and there's a lot of uh, ritual, I would say. And so they sage you. They just want to make sure that you're clear of anything that you're bringing in. They create a sacred space, like a lot of retreats. Like they just create a safe container where you feel safe, where it is safe to talk about things, and energetically it's safe. And we kind of got there. We set up our little spots, kind of the center altar where the shamans are, and then we're kind of circled around it in a semicircle in kind of like beds. And so we're there, and we just kind of, we have like 30 minutes of silence before we begin. We we have some, we set our intentions, so we share what our intentions are, and then after some opening ceremonies and whatnot, then we'll drink the medicine.
Were you dressed a certain way, or did you have to come dressed uh, a certain way?
They recommended very comfortable clothing, so like stuff that you would like. I have like this baggy linen stuff that I might use for yoga or whatnot.
And was it a mixture of men, women, young and old, or what was the group primarily?
Interestingly, it was mostly men. This time there was only one woman, and there was only five of us. It was a very small ceremony.
Okay.
So
Is that
yeah,
normal?
for this group it was, because they like to
Okay.
keep it very intimate, and there was four shamans. So there were two shamans and two assistants. So it was like, almost one to one care, which was
So for our
incredible.
audience, can you describe what a shaman is or what they look like?
Sure. So shaman, the original word comes from Siberia, but we utilize it now in English to mean people of native descent that do native practices, generally some type of work like medicine work, energy work, root work, that kind of thing. And in this case, these shamans were from the Shipibo tribe, which is a tribe in um, Peru. And they are one of like the oldest, most traditional tribes that deal with ayahuasca, because they're all over South America and Mexico, especially in Brazil. But this particular tribe, Shipibo, was from uh, what did I just say?
Peru,
Peru. Thank you.
right?
And and so they're very traditional. They're dressed in traditional clothing from their culture, and the way that they do things, the tools that they use are very traditional in that sense. And some of the tools that they would use are mapacho, which is a type of traditional tobacco, and they use that to kind of clear. Like people would, they use sage too, like white sage. Like a
Mhm.
lot of people use that, or santo palo, which is a wood, to just they light it on fire and they'll create. So there's a lot of smoke.
Okay. And then was it like a yoga bed that you had, or a raised bed, or what did you lay on?
They told us to bring like a pad, a bed. I brought some bedding. It was
Okay.
just basically a bunch of blankets that I laid on the floor.
Okay.
Nothing too
So
fancy.
so you said you took the medicine. How did that work?
So what the first night that they do it, the shaman will, she decide how much medicine that you should take the first night,
You said the first.
and
How many nights were you there?
3 nights.
Oh, okay. All right.
It was a 4 day thing.
Okay.
And so the first night, that's like a cup about this big, and she filled it pretty much all the way to the top. And so a full a full dose, if you will, of that. And that was a lot. That was a lot for me. I think.
And what happened?
Then they basically let you kind of lie down and sit for a while. And what happens is like people will have visions or people will start to see things or hear things and also purge. And so purging could be in many different forms. It could be vomiting, could be burping, could be passing gas, it could be retching, it could be yawning. So the idea is that anything that's stuck in the body like energy or trauma, you're just letting it out. However it needs to come out, it's going to come out. And it could be a lot, right? And so there was a lot of vomiting, a lot of
Okay.
purging. But during that time, you're seeing things, and it could be in the mind's eye. It could be I didn't really see much with my actual eyes, but it was like when I closed my eyes, a lot of stuff would come through, and I could work through it. I could talk to them. I could interact with them. And then during that time, the shamans are often singing what's called ikros, and the ikros are channeled songs that they're singing, that they're just pulling through, and it helps guide the souls, guide the energetic bodies of these people to where they need to go to heal and
So
to
how
find the
long did
medicine.
this particular thing, or we call it a phase, or what? How long did that last?
Oh gosh, I don't even know because we had no access to technology. We gave away our phones, watches, everything. But I know that it started around 6 o'clock in the night, and then maybe 1 in the morning.
Did you eventually go to sleep?
Yes, we did.
Okay, in the same area, in the same spot.
Exact same spot. You just kind of crash where you are.
Okay. Were
Yeah,
were you as you were? I'm going to ask you in a second to describe what you, if you don't mind sharing, what you saw or what happened with you. But
sure.
were you impacted or influenced by what other people were going through, or saying, or doing, or were you kind of in your own little world?
That's a really good question because since there was five of us, and I'm pretty sensitive, and since we do energy work, we are sensitive to people's energies. And there was one person that was just really having a really bad time, like just really seemed traumatic. And so I was often drawn to that person and trying to help that person because we're all kind of connected. You can feel like there's a connection, and we are actually helping each other work through these traumas, through these things that we're facing.
Mm.
And so, yes, I was reticent of what that other person was going through, and I was trying to send energy and helping them shift things. But generally, you are very focused on yourself. You are kind of in your own little world.
Okay.
If that
So I
makes
think
sense.
what I really want to hear, I think that people listening want to hear, is what
Mm-hmm.
what did you experience that first of all, before I ask you that, how many times did you do this? Like, did you do it 3 nights, so it happened 3 times, or you did it during the day also, so it happened 6 times, or how many times did this happen?
Good question. So it's three ceremonies, one every night. And then during the ceremony, you drink some in the beginning, and then you have the option of drinking it two more times during the ceremony if you want. But I was so gone. I could
Okay.
not handle anymore. Just
So
one.
what did you do during the day? Was it still part of, was it recovering, or
Yeah.
more work, or what did you do during the daytime?
So we usually slept in until like maybe 9 or 10, and then we would have breakfast together. They would make the food for us, and it was all like the food that we could eat, right?
Right.
And then we would have a sharing circle, and we would go through and talk about what each of us experienced in the previous night's ceremony.
Okay. That answered the next question I was going to ask. Did you share with other people what you went through? Okay. So tell us what happened the first night.
So the first night was very intense. I went with the intention. I said, look, I want to face whatever I need to face. Whatever it is, whatever needs to come up, I want to face it. And I'm ready to do it. And I was not ready. I was not ready. There was so much stuff because it's parts of you that you kind of, at least again, each experience is different, but the experience that I had was parts of me that I did not want to look at, that I wanted to push to the corner, push to the side, and say, no, it's okay. I don't need to worry about that. Right in my face. right in my face. Stuff with past relationships, stuff with my kids, stuff that I had done to other people, stuff that they had done to me. So almost like a past life review. In a sense, it was like scene after scene after scene after scene. And you could feel that. And then there'd be this love. Like, okay, like, I forgive you and I love you and I hope you forgive me. And I hope that, and you just felt this mutual love for one another. And it was hard to watch, but it was really interesting. And one of the things that, and this is very personal, but was that my father's side, there's always been this kind of anger thing, like this almost, I wouldn't call it toxic masculinity, but it's just a very masculine, strong anger that seems to be present. So one of the biggest experiences that I had the first night was, it was rather personal, but it was kind of dealing with generational trauma is actually what the shamans were saying. So it's like this trauma that had actually happened. I was seeing all the way back to like Italy and Spain, dealing with my father's side. And it was this trauma of like anger, this anger that had just been passed on generation to generation with like no actual reason that I could see. Like there was some reason generations and generations ago, but now it had no context. And so I saw actually my dad show up, who had passed away in 2016, and my grandfather, who passed away when I was like 11. And the three of us, and they both looked great, and they're both in great condition and very friendly, very happy to see me. And we were working together to like dismantle. It just looked like a structure, like it was translating it into this physical thing that we're literally like breaking apart. And then my great grandfather showed up, whom I've never met, but I know what he looks like. He showed up. So the four of us were then working together to dismantle this generational trauma. And my God, that was intense. That was really intense. And I felt so much better after that. But a lot of stuff, like both my grandmothers came in, family members that had passed away came in. A lot of people came in, and it was beautiful.
I know, of course, your father and your grandfather. So what did they look like when you saw them? Were they young or old or what?
My grandfather looked like he did when I was probably like 5 or 6. So he just looked like he was in good health before he got really bad diabetes and cancer and stuff like that. And my father looked like probably also when I was 5 or 6. So, but he looked really happy. He was like in shorts and a t-shirt, and like he had like a very 80s haircut with not a lot of gray yet.
I can think of pictures of him like that.
Right.
So was it people that had passed that you saw, or did you actually deal with people who are still alive?
Both. So I saw like ex-girlfriends or other friends or different people I had interactions with. I saw my kids. I saw my siblings. So
when that happens, what are you seeing? Like their uber soul, or as some people refer to it as the soul that exists, in spirit, and just a piece of us is here incarnate, or what did you interact with?
I am guessing here. I'm making an educated guess. And I'm just interacting with their soul, but it's translating it into what my brain or whatever visual system is translating it for me, whether it's my third eye or whatever, was just showing me an image of them that I recognize.
Okay. So the first obvious question is, how do you know that all this was really, that you were really connected to spirit versus hallucinating or just in your own head kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I think I've never taken a hallucinogen before, so I don't know that I have a good control or basis for comparison there on that side. However, it felt very much like when I'm in deep meditation that I'm connected to something or someone. Like you could just, there was a lot of emotions attached to it. So it may have been completely and utterly a hallucination. However, there was healing. And from my perspective, and from what I felt as far as, again, what it felt like to meditate, it just felt like a super deep meditation. And it did feel like I was connected to the people that I was talking to. And I got
Okay.
information from some of them that maybe I didn't know. So there's that too.
That's a great point because that was another question I had. Did you learn something from this that you would not have otherwise known, which might further demonstrate that you were connected to some other plane other than here on Earth? Like the
Yeah.
whole thing about the toxic masculinity, or not toxic masculinity, but the masculine ancestors that you went back through. You didn't know any of that before this experience, did you?
No. I mean, no. I didn't know of any generational trauma that we had. Um, but apparently it was a pretty big deal.
Did you find out what the root of that was, or how was that resolved?
I saw flashes of it. I don't really understand what it was, but it looked like, I don't know, medieval Italy or something like that in medieval Spain.
Does
And
Gerardi go back to those regions of the world? I assume, right? Your
I did,
family name.
it does to Italy for sure. It's a is a group of a family of names that has a great long history and, you know, all sorts of stuff. It's been translated to different names, different spellings and whatnot, but it's a very, there's a lot of history in Italy. I did not know about the Spain part.
Okay.
There was some Spanish roots in my grandmother's side, but I'm working on my father's side, so I'm not sure where that's coming from. That's what I saw.
Can you share anything that you may have learned that you didn't know before?
So there was there was like this being that came to me. It looked like a Grim Reaper, but it was very friendly and very nice and just very jovial and funny. And in fact, there was a point where I had left to throw up. I came back, and he looked dead. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Oh, you left for so long, I died of boredom." I was like, "What?" Just constantly joking with me. And he was showing me like this technique which I haven't mastered yet, but a technique to really leave the body. To like basically like he's like, you have to learn how to die. And I was like, I have to learn how to die? And he's like, yeah, you have to learn how to die. Doesn't mean you're dead doesn't mean the end of your life, but it means you have to learn how to die, like as in leave your body, and then you can come back. So that was interesting. And there's a couple other things I saw, um, too, that I didn't know. So that was interesting. And they
So
were
were
showing me
the
like literally how, like mechanically, how you're unlatching from the pineal gland. So it was very fascinating.
were the other two experiences similar to that, where you met people who had passed, or that you went through the same type of healing?
The second night was more hands-on. So they called that like it's like a bodywork session. So the shamans would come to you. They would give you different kinds of medicine, not just the ayahuasca and the eye drops and some type of snuff that you would just be shot into your nose. You wouldn't breathe it in your lungs, but it would just be kind of inside your sinuses to awaken different parts of your body. And then they would come through and they do like energy work on you. And I could literally feel like that was a little freaky because I could feel like things getting rewired. And I was really like uncomfortable at first. And then as soon as they came by, like I immediately calmed down and I could feel like this energy flow through my body. I felt like my nervous system being rewired. And then at one point I saw like with my actual eyes, like I leaned my head up and I saw a hole in my chest, like right where my heart chakra is. and they were repairing something in there. And then, as soon as I saw it close up, then they were done. Then they left. But it was a little crazy. So
And then how about the third night?
the third night, that's where they kind of seal in all the work that you do and just make sure that you're kind of starting your processing. And so that night, each night I progressively drank less and less. That night I took one sip and I put a little bit on my third eye. Like I dipped my finger in the cup, and which is another way to take the medicine. And I was out of my mind, like for like
Wow.
3 days. So it was like the less that I took, the more intense it was for me, which was very interesting. And that was more like cleaning everything up, like finishing things that I didn't finish. But that night was really weird because after the ceremony, generally it's like 1 or 2 in the morning, and you might get up, you might have something to eat to ground yourself. But I was feeling so out of it, I couldn't even walk, which is unusual. And one of the shamans was like, "Hey, you want to go outside and ground with me? I'll help you ground." So we took our shoes off, and we're surrounded by forest in the middle of nowhere. And so we just go outside and we're talking and we're just observing the beautiful stars because we can see so much. And maybe about 20 minutes into it, I start hearing something. And I was like, what is that noise? It was like a high-pitched like hum that was like varying a little bit. Like, and I was like, what? I said, do you hear that? And she's like, I do. You're not hallucinating. It's like, what is that sound? It sounds like the forest is singing. She's like, yeah, I don't know. I've never heard this before. And so we just like soaked it in. It shifted once or twice to a higher frequency and then back down. We found out that the frequencies that it was coming through was for the crown chakra and the brow chakra. And we were just listening. We were like, okay, it felt like an alien spaceship was going to land. Like that's what it felt like. So we're just sitting there in the grass right by the forest, just like, if there's anybody out there, we welcome you, or we'd love to meet you. And we felt a strong presence. We didn't see anything, but we definitely felt something, and it was just, we felt amazing listening to this sound coming from seemingly nowhere. And there's nothing out there. It didn't sound electronic. We were out in that forest earlier doing hiking during the day, and there's nothing out there. It's just like a stream and trees. And so we are confused, but also very excited to have this experience. And then
How long did that last?
I would say about 20 minutes.
Okay. That was the last night? I'm sorry.
Yes, you're right. That was the last night. Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Finish your thought
No.
there.
Yeah. And then we were actually directed to a star in the sky. And I researched what it was later, and it's Aldebaran. So it's like, and it was right next to Jupiter at that time. And it's like to the left of the Pleiades. And Aldebaran apparently has a lot of things to share with us. And they often don't communicate with humans, apparently, for those of people who communicate with other star systems, like energetically. And we just felt like this huge download of information. So that was totally unexpected, but an interesting part of the experience for sure.
When you say you were directed to that star, what do you mean you're directed?
Like we felt like we were like talking to each other, like we feel like we should be looking up. I'm like, okay, let's look up. And we're both looking up in the sky, and we were just like, we both turned at the same time. We both looked up, and we're like, are you attracted, or like there's some affinity to that star right there? Because it was a little bit pink, the star. And she said that to me, and I was like, yes. It's like, oh my God, like what is going on? And she actually started to see symbols around the star, and she drew them out. I saw just kind of spinning vortex around it. Mm-hmm. Not what she saw, but I was like, wow, something is going on with that star.
So Jamie, just to wrap this up, well, at least come to a conclusion here. Would you recommend this to anyone else, or if you were to recommend it to someone else, where would they need to be on their spiritual journey before they attempted something like this?
Mike, it is hard to do this. It is not easy, and and there are several times where I'm like, can this just be over? Because it's so intense, and you feel sick the entire time. You feel sick, even when you're seeing these visions, even when you're having experiences, you feel sick, and so I don't know that I would recommend it to anybody, but I would say if you're drawn to it, if you feel a connection, if you feel like this is part of your journey, then look at it. But I would never tell anyone, you should go do ayahuasca.
So the experience itself, though, would you, from what you've been telling us here, I assume that you think it was a positive and healing experience for you, not a bad trip, if you will.
It was absolutely healing. I felt like I had gotten rid of a lot of stuff that I needed to get rid of. I felt like a lot of my sense of self, ego, things like that I did not need were gone. And it took, I mean, the couple days after it were very intense. I needed to sleep a lot and just process. I'm still processing, but yeah, it's very intense. It's like 20 years of therapy in a couple nights. So if that makes sense.
So, and just one last question here, because my podcast and my journey is about looking at a lot of things dealing with religion, or at least the world's primary religions. Is there any parallel, or how would you describe your experience with ayahuasca and that spiritual experience with what most people experience through the religious experiences? Was there a God that you connected to, or was there is it the same source?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good parts of religion, right, are the fact that if you feel a connection to God, just personally, I don't feel like I want anyone in between, like a middleman, like a priest or something like that. But if that is where you feel your connection, then that's beautiful, and I fully support that. But yes, I think it's the same. I think we all have the same source. It's just we're all the same thing. There's nothing that's not God.
You didn't feel that the shamans were any type of intermediary or in between you and what you were experiencing, did you?
No, they were there to help you, because there was one time, Mike, where I was stuck, and I felt like I was the goal is to heal yourself, but I was just focused on this other person. I was really just wanting to help them, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go help them. And I knew what was wrong. Like, I immediately understood, like, this person had an issue with their solar plexus chakra, and I was stuck though, because I knew I can't get up and help them. And I was just stuck in this cycle. And so one of the shamans came up and she held my hand very gently, and she's like, look, Jamie, you need to remember your intention, and this is time for you. And I was like, oh shoot, I am distracting myself by trying to heal other people when I need to heal myself. And that was a big lesson.
Okay.
So they're aware of when there's issues, and they come to help you.
Just back to the question of source. Did you feel that you were connected with what one might describe as source, or the ultimate love, or whatever it is that we all look to or relate to as God? Did you connect with that, or was it that you connected with helpers that were along the way that were trying to help you solve your own problems, but you necessarily didn't connect with source?
Well, you could look at it in a couple different ways, but if everything is source, then I'm always connected to source, and I would just see it in different ways. But in this sense, I didn't feel like the shamans were an intermediary. They were more like guides, if that makes sense. And I did feel like I was connecting to what I needed to connect to. So I wasn't blissed out. I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so happy. I'm connected to directly with source, like I'm having an NDE, right?
Right.
Like a lot of people who have near-death experiences. That was not what happened with mine. And a lot of people with ayahuasca, they don't feel that, because it's more like, this is the hard work that you have got to do. The last night, I did get some of that where I felt, wow, so connected. I was like laughing so hard. I was afraid it was going to distract people, but I was so happy. It was like laughing, just very blissful. But then I had to do more work. But I did get there. But basically, I think the way that we deal with ayahuasca, the way that we handle ayahuasca here is very much like, you got work to do, get to it, if that makes sense.
So Jamie, how if someone wants to get in touch with you, how would they do that if they want to, find out more?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you for asking. So I do energy work and QHHT, the quantum healing hypnosis technique, and you can go to prodigyhealing.com to get more information about that. There's a lot of stuff about that.
Prodigyhealing.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you do energy work with people, right?
Correct.
Do you do QHHT now?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Super. You and I are going to do that eventually.
Okay, awesome. That'll be great.
Okay.
Can I show you something really fast?
Yeah, sure.
So this is interesting. This is physical evidence that something went down. So they ask us to take things with us that we are connected with for our altar. So I took pictures of my grandparents. I took pictures of my kids. I took a bunch of crystals. So what happened though is every single crystal that I took changed physically. So this is just a chunk of quartz. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
This was virtually clear, perfectly clear. There was a little bit of cracking in the middle because I used to keep this over an LED light and I'd have to angle it perfectly so that it would catch the light because otherwise you wouldn't see it. It wouldn't. But I don't know if you can see, but you see how it's kind of white?
Yeah.
And you see all these little microfractures in there?
Yeah.
That all happened from the ceremonies. That was not there before. Even my kids commented, they're like, what happened to your crystals?
Was it still the whole time? Like
All
you
of
didn't,
these,
like throw it against the wall or anything?
there was no throwing against the wall. I was holding them, but there were also crystals that stayed in front of me the whole time. And they're less affected. But the ones, these two big, I have another one somewhere else. But this big one and another big one that I had are full of these microfractures that almost make it look opaque or white.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was completely clear. So that's pretty crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Look, I appreciate your time certainly today. Thank you for joining us. And I'll put the information you just shared with me about prodigyhealing.com in the show notes for both this and the audio version and the YouTube version.
Oh, great.
But it's good to see you again. We'll get together for the QHHT thing.
Okay.
All right.
Perfect.
So thanks, Jamie. I really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, Mike. Take care.